Welcome to Monk's Temple. Tonight, we aren't climbing a mountain to find a sage. We aren't deciphering ancient scrolls. The stillness we long for isn't a distant destination. It's closer than your next breath. It's the spacious awareness that already exists beneath the endless conversation in your mind. Our journey explores a way of being known as Mushin, no mind. This isn't emptiness or dullness. It's a state of natural, effortless flow, where action arises from clarity, not from calculation, like a bird riding the wind without a map. Before we begin, just arrive. Notice where your body meets the world, the pressure of the surface beneath you, the fabric against your skin. There's nothing to adjust. Simply be here. We live so much of our lives in the control tower of our thoughts. Planning, comparing, rehearsing, worrying. It's a full-time job, and we've come to believe the controller's frantic voice is who we are. But what if you are not the controller? What if you are the vast, silent sky through which the controller's signals pass? What if deep rest comes not from obeying the controller's frantic orders, but from realizing you were never the controller to begin with? That is the territory of no mind. We'll explore it not through lectures, but through stories. Whispers from different times and places that all point to the same truth. You don't need to remember them. You don't need to analyze them. Let them settle into you like stones sinking into a still pond. Just listen, and let the ripples carry you into rest. Let's begin our first story in a place of quiet industry, a glassblowing studio in Venice. There was a master glassblower named Luca. His hands could coax forms from molten silica that seemed impossible. Vases that held light like captured sunshine, sculptures that were both heavy and weightless at once. Apprentices would watch, mesmerized, as he worked the glowing gather of glass at the end of his blowpipe. He never seemed to force it. He would turn the pipe, sometimes blowing gently, sometimes using simple wooden tools, and the form would emerge, as if it had always been inside the molten crystal, waiting to be revealed. A new apprentice, Sophia, was brilliant. She studied chemistry to understand the glass composition, physics to comprehend thermodynamics. She could calculate exactly how long to reheat the piece before the next step. Yet, her creations, while technically sound, were stiff. They lacked the living grace of Luca's work. One day, struggling with a piece that kept cracking, she asked in frustration, "Maestro, what is the formula for the curve? How do you know the exact moment to shape it?" Luca didn't answer immediately. He gathered a new ball of molten glass, a glowing orange sun at the end of his pipe. "Watch," he said. But he didn't shape it. He simply rotated it, his eyes soft, his attention not on the glass but on the heat radiating from it. "I am not knowing with my head," he said, his voice calm over the roar of the furnace. "I am knowing with my skin, with my eyes that feel the color of the heat." The glass speaks. It says, "I am too cold," by stiffening. It says, "I am ready," by flowing like honey. My hands listen. If I think, now I make a curve, I am already late. I must be empty, so the curve can make itself. He then demonstrated. He didn't impose a shape. He created conditions, heat, rotation, a gentle breath, and the glass ballooned into a perfect, spherical bubble. It was an act of co-creation, not imposition. "Your mind is a good furnace tender," Luca said to Sophia. "It keeps the fire. But it is a terrible sculptor. The sculptor is here. He placed a hand on his chest, then on hers. It is a quiet feeling. You must let the furnace tender rest, and let the sculptor feel. Sophia began to practice differently. Before shaping, she would close her eyes and feel the heat on her face, listen to the sound of the glass cooling. She stopped trying to make and started trying to listen. The day her first graceful, fluid vase emerged, she didn't feel like she had created it. She felt she had midwifed it into existence. The knowledge hadn't been in her thinking mind, but in a deeper, patient dialogue between her senses and the material world. This is our first teaching on No Mind, the intelligence of dialogue. We often approach life as sculptors, trying to force our will onto inert material, our tasks, our relationships, even our own moods. Mushin invites us to become listeners first. It suggests that the world is not inert, but responsive. The glass speaks through its temperature. The wood speaks through its grain. A problem speaks through the tension it creates. When we stop broadcasting our plans and start receiving these subtle signals, our actions become timely, appropriate, and surprisingly effortless. We move with the grain of reality, not against it. If this way of being, of listening more than forcing, resonates with you, you're always welcome in Monk's Temple. Consider subscribing to carry this sense of ease with you. Our thinking mind is like a brilliant but hyperactive librarian. It constantly scurries along the shelves of memory and possibility, pulling down books, cross-referencing, making loud notes. It's invaluable for research. But it's a terrible companion for watching a sunset. For that, you need to step out of the library altogether and just be in the twilight. No mind is that step outside. Let's explore this with a story from a vast, silent landscape, the Australian outback. An Aboriginal elder, known as Uncle Jack, was a custodian of songlines, the ancient oral maps that describe the land and its creation stories through song. To navigate hundreds of miles of trackless desert, he would sing. The rhythm, the pitch, the very vibration of the song in his body would tell him where he was and where to go. A geologist, Dr. Anna Carter, was mapping the same region with GPS and satellite imagery. Intrigued by Uncle Jack's methods, she asked to accompany him. As they walked, Uncle Jack sang softly, a low, droning melody that seemed to vibrate with the red earth itself. Anna, her mind full of topographic maps and coordinates, was disoriented. Every dune looked the same. "How can a song tell you where you are?" she asked. Uncle Jack stopped. He knelt, placing his palm flat on the ground. "The land is not outside," he said. "It is inside the song. The song is not about the waterhole. The song is the waterhole, singing itself through me. When I sing it, I am not lost, because I am the land at that place." He tapped her GPS unit. "That tells you where your body is. The song tells you where your being is. They are different knowings." He had her be silent. "Listen not with your ears," he said. "Listen with your bones. Feel the hum of this place." Anna closed her eyes, letting go of her need to identify and plot. At first, there was just heat and silence. Then, she began to feel a subtle, almost magnetic pull, a certain quality of stillness that was unique to that particular stretch of desert. It wasn't data, it was a feeling of presence. She wasn't thinking her location, she was feeling it. For a moment, her librarian mind was quiet, and an older, more embodied knowing took its place. This reveals no mind as embodied navigation. We navigate life mostly with the maps of our thoughts, our plans, our past experiences, our fears. These are our psychological GPS. They work, but they can leave us feeling disconnected, like a dot on a screen. Mushin involves tuning into the songline of the present moment, the direct, sensory, felt experience of being here. This song doesn't give you coordinates, it gives you belonging. It tells you you're home, right where you are. Anxiety is often the static that comes from listening to the frantic librarian instead of the ancient, steady song of your own being in the here and now. I recall a time this became real for me. Stuck in a traffic jam, late for an important meeting, my mind was a storm of frustration and catastrophic forecasting. Then, for no reason, I looked at the tree beside the road. Really looked. I saw the intricate pattern of its bark, the way a single leaf twirled in a breeze I couldn't feel. For about 10 seconds, I was just seeing, not thinking about being late. In that tiny window of pure perception, the panic vanished. I was still in the traffic, but I was no longer at war with it. I had accidentally tuned into the song of the tree, and it was more real and immediate than the story in my head. It was a small lesson in the power of sensory anchor points. This aligns with research on mindfulness and the brain's default mode network, DMN. The DMN is the circuitry of self-referential thought, the TME network that activates when we're mind-wandering, ruminating, or worrying. Studies show that practices focusing on present-moment sensory awareness reliably quiet the DMN. It's not mystical, it's a neurological shift. You're literally switching your brain from its self-centered storytelling mode to its direct experiencing mode. The peace that follows isn't manufactured, it's the natural quiet that appears when the noisy self-story takes a break. Now, let's visit a story about a different kind of craft, from the misty highlands of Scotland. Fiona was a restorer of antique tapestries. Her work was one of immense patience, reweaving lost fragments of centuries-old stories thread by thread. The greatest challenge wasn't the technique, but the intention. A clumsy restoration could scream its modernity, breaking the spell of the old weaving. Her mentor, Mrs. MacLeod, now in her 90s, had taught her a strange preparatory ritual. Before touching a new piece, Fiona was to sit with it for an hour in silence. Not studying it, not analyzing the weave or dyes. Just sitting, letting her gaze soften, allowing the tapestry to simply be in the room with her. "You're waiting for the tapestry to dream you," Mrs. MacLeod had said cryptically. Fiona, being young and efficient, found this quaint but unnecessary. She'd do a quick version, then dive in. Her restorations were impeccable, yet curators would sometimes note a faint hardness where her new threads met the old. Then came the unicorn tapestry. A precious, fragile fragment. Haunted by its importance, Fiona finally surrendered to the full ritual. She sat in the quiet conservation lab, the faded fabric before her. She let go of her agenda, her fear, her expertise. Minutes stretched. Her mind quieted from its professional chatter. And then, something shifted. She didn't see the tapestry as a problem to be solved, but as a living entity, holding the quiet hands of the long-dead weavers within it. She felt a specific, gentle patience emanate from the work itself. It wasn't a thought, it was an atmosphere. When she finally picked up her needle, her movements were different. Slower, more reverent. She chose threads not just by color match, but by a felt sense of rightness. The new will seem to hum against the old. When she finished, the restoration was seamless, not just technically, but spiritually. The hardness was gone. The tapestry felt whole again. Mrs. McLeod visited, ran a thin hand over the repair, and nodded. "It dreamed you," she said simply. "You got small and quiet enough to hear what it needed to become again. You didn't restore it. You allowed it to restore itself through you." This illustrates no mind as receptive service. So much of our effort is imposing our will, fixing, improving, changing. Mushin in any restorative act, whether fixing a tapestry, healing a relationship, or even caring for our own tired spirits, involves a period of receptive stillness. It's stepping back from the role of the expert fixer and becoming a humble conduit for what wants to heal. The intelligence for the repair doesn't come from our personal store of knowledge alone, it arises from a deep dialogue with the broken thing itself. We become an instrument of wholeness, not its architect. Let's continue our exploration of no mind by shifting from restoration to motion, from the quiet lab to the open sea. In the Caribbean, there were fishermen who practiced a method called hand lining for deep-sea species like snapper and grouper. One man, Marcus, was legendary. He could feel a fish take the bait hundreds of feet below through a single nylon line wound around his hand. Others used rods with sensitive tips, but Marcus used only his bare skin. He'd sit in his boat, eyes often closed, his hand resting lightly on the line as it vanished into the deep blue. "What are you feeling for?" his grandson, Ben, asked, struggling with his modern rod and reel. "The whisper," Marcus said. "Before the tug, there is a whisper. A change in the tension so small it's not a pull, it's a thought. The fish thinks about the bait. That thought travels up the line." He held up his calloused fingers. "If you wait for the yank, you are already in a fight. If you feel the thought and give a little line, the fish hooks itself. No fight. Just agreement." Ben was skeptical. A thought in a fishing line. But he tried. He put down his rod, took a hand line, and focused. For a long time, he felt nothing but the steady drag of the current. His mind wandered to chores, to worries. Then, he remembered his grandfather's relaxed attention. He stopped trying to feel and just let his hand be present on the line. His mind grew still. And then he felt it, a tiny, almost imaginary softening of the tension, a faint query from the deep. Instinctively, he let a few inches of line slip. A moment later, a firm, confident pull set the hook solidly. He hauled up a beautiful red snapper, which came up calmly, not thrashing. He had felt the fish's intention before the fish itself knew it was committed. He hadn't outsmarted it, he had listened to it. The catch felt less like a conquest and more like a collaboration. This is no mind as a tuned response. So often, we engage with life, with people, with tasks, with challenges. Only when it's already a full-blown tug-of-war. We react to the yank. Mushin is about cultivating the sensitivity to feel the whisper beforehand. The subtle shift in a colleague's mood before an argument erupts. The faint internal signal of fatigue before exhaustion hits. The first quiet intuition about a decision. When we are mentally noisy, we miss these whispers. In stillness, we feel them, and our response can be a graceful, preemptive adjustment, giving a little line, rather than a jarring, exhausting reaction. Now, let's travel to a place where thinking too much can be fatal, the big walls of Yosemite. Alex was a free climber, scaling sheer granite faces without ropes, where a single mistake meant death. People called it madness. For Alex, it was the ultimate exercise in no mind. You cannot afford a single thought that is not the rock, he explained. If you think, I am high, fear enters. If you think, what if I slip? You have already introduced the idea of falling. Your mind must be so focused it becomes the rock itself. He described his state while climbing not as hyper-thinking, but as hyper-presence. It's not calculation. Calculation is too slow. It's perception and action fused into one thing. My eyes see a crystal edge. My fingers are already moving to it. There is no me deciding. There is seeing moving, one flow. The me that worries, that has a past and a future, that person is gone. There is only the dance with the granite in this eternal present. For him, the mortal danger forced an absolute surrender of the chattering, storytelling self. That self was a lethal distraction. What remained was a pure, animal-like awareness, utterly merged with the task. The peace he described wasn't a relaxed bliss, but a profound, silent clarity, the ultimate expression of being undivided. This presents a stark, powerful face of no mind, unity of perception and action. In our daily lives, we are almost always divided. We perceive a task, an email, then we think about it, dread, planning, then we act, type. This gap between perception and action is where the thinking mind lives, with all its commentary and resistance. In moments of Mushin, whether in climbing, playing a perfect musical phrase, or even in a crisis, that gap collapses. Perception is action. There is no middleman of thought. This is why athletes speak of being in the zone. It's a state of supreme efficiency and peace, because the energy normally wasted on internal negotiation is freed for pure doing. We don't need a cliff face to practice this. We can bring a taste of it to mundane acts. Try washing a dish with such total attention that there is no gap between seeing the soap suds and moving the sponge. For those few seconds, the complaining, storytelling mind is unemployed. That is a moment of Mushin. Our culture often misinterprets this state as being thoughtless in a negative way. But neuroscience sheds a different light. This fusion is associated with heightened activity in the sensory-motor cortex and quieting of the prefrontal cortex, the seat of narrative self-reflection. It's not a lower state of consciousness, it's a different, often more efficient and integrated one. Let's explore a more communal, rhythmic expression of this unity, from the heart of West Africa. In a village in Ghana, the community would gather for drumming ceremonies. The master drummer, Kwame, didn't just keep time, he conducted a conversation with the dancers, the singers, the very spirit of the gathering. A young drummer, Kofi, practiced the complex polyrhythms until his hands bled, but he couldn't capture the life of it. "You are playing the drum," Kwame told him. "You must let the drum play you. Listen to the feet of the dancers. Your rhythm is not here." He tapped Kofi's head. "It is there." He pointed to the dancing circle. The drum must answer the question the feet are asking. Stop counting. Start listening with your whole body. During the next ceremony, Kofi stopped trying to execute his memorized pattern. He let his attention dissolve into the whole scene, the dust rising, the sweat gleaming, the arc of a dancer's arm. He felt the collective pulse of the village as a single, breathing organism. And then his hands began to move. They weren't following a preset rhythm, they were responding, commenting, encouraging. He was no longer a drummer for the ceremony, he was a voice within the ceremony. His individual mind had dissolved into the group's collective flow. He experienced a joyous, ecstatic loss of self, finding a larger self in the shared rhythm. This is no mind as collective resonance. We think of enlightenment or peace as a solitary achievement. But Mushin can also be a shared, emergent property. When individuals let go of their personal agendas and egoic control, they can sink into a larger intelligence, a team flowing in a game, a jazz band finding a groove, a crew rowing in perfect unison. The peace found here is one of belonging, of being a note in a harmonious chord. The tiredness of individualism, the burden of being solely responsible, of maintaining your separate story, melts away in these moments of collective Mushin. Now, consider a story from the opposite end of the spectrum, utter solitude in the Siberian taiga. A trapper named Nikolai would spend months alone in his cabin. The silence, he said, was at first a roaring in his ears, the sound of his own thoughts, unleashed and unchallenged. He'd talk to himself, argue with memories, plan and replan. It was maddening. But as the weeks passed, a change occurred. The internal chatter, having no new fuel and no audience, began to slow. Like a pond settling after a storm, the silt of his thoughts drifted down. What remained was a crystal-clear awareness. He began to notice things he never had, the specific way dawn light hit a particular pine tree, the subtle difference in the wind's sound before a snowfall, the language of animal tracks not as signs to be decoded, but as stories written directly on the snow. Out there, he said later, you are not a man with thoughts. You are a creature of the forest. The thinking is for the cabin, for mending traps, for remembering. Outside, you must be eyes, ears, nose. The mind that names things, squirrel, cold, distance, that mind gets quiet. And an older mind wakes up. A mind that just knows without words. That is the mind that keeps you alive. And that, he added, is the mind that is at peace. It has no problems. It only has what is. This reveals no mind as primal awareness. Beneath the sophisticated, linguistic, self-conscious layer of our mind is an older, animal awareness. It is direct, immediate, and non-conceptual. It doesn't worry, it perceives. It doesn't regret, it responds. In our modern lives, we are almost permanently camped in the linguistic, self-conscious layer. We're narrating our lives instead of living them. Practices that immerse us in nature, or even simple sensory focus, are ways to dip into this primal, peaceful awareness. It's deeply restful because it's pre-personal. The weight of your personal history and future doesn't exist there. You are simply a conscious part of the living world. I experienced a whisper of this during a silent hike. After hours of walking, my mental to-do list finally ran out of steam. Suddenly, the forest wasn't a collection of trees and rocks anymore. It was a mosaic of green light, textured bark, damp earth smell, and a symphony of tiny sounds. I wasn't a hiker in the forest. The distinction blurred. I was part of the mosaic. The chronic low-grade anxiety I carried vanished. It had no place in that direct experience. I was simply here, in the oldest sense of the word. This connects to the biophilia hypothesis, the idea that humans have an innate affinity for the natural world. Part of the deep peace we find in nature may come from this very shift. Nature's complexity and sensory richness effortlessly pulls us out of our self-referential thinking and into that state of primal, engaged awareness. It forces Mushin upon us. Let's bring this back to a very human, urban context, a courtroom. Judge Henderson was known for her uncanny sense of justice. Lawyers would present meticulously argued cases, mountains of evidence. But colleagues noticed she often made key decisions based on what she called the silence between the words. The facts are the map, she explained privately. But the truth is the territory. You learn to listen to the territory. When someone is lying, even well, there's a tiny fracture between their words and their energy. It's not in what they say, it's in the microsecond pause before they say it, the almost imperceptible shift in their posture when a certain fact is mentioned. If I'm thinking too hard about the legal precedent, I miss it. I have to listen from a place that is very still and very soft. She described her ideal state on the bench not as intense analysis, but as compassionate, neutral openness, a Mushin of judgment. She wasn't forming opinions as she listened, she was allowing the truth of the situation to impress itself upon her awareness. Her final decision then felt less like a choice and more like a recognition of what was already, inevitably true. This shows no mind as discernment. We often confuse thinking with discernment. We believe that to judge wisely, we must think harder, analyze more. But the highest form of discernment can be a receptive, intuitive clarity. It's what we call wisdom. Wisdom isn't a pile of facts, it's the ability to see the whole pattern, to feel the moral weight of a situation. This kind of seeing happens when the noisy, opinionated mind settles. It's a clear mirror reflecting reality, not a busy painter projecting its own ideas onto it. From the courtroom to the cosmos, let's end this part with a story about the ultimate perspective. An astronaut, Maria, described her first spacewalk. Tethered outside the International Space Station, she was tasked with a complex repair. On Earth, she had trained for it 100 times in simulators, her mind full of procedures and checklists. But outside, floating in the silent blackness, with the glorious blue curve of Earth below, something happened. The procedural mind, the Maria, who was an engineer with a task, simply dissolved. I wasn't fixing a station, she said. I was a tiny, conscious part of the universe, tending to another tiny part. The me that worries about deadlines, about looking competent, about past mistakes, that me was gone. There was only the vastness, the beautiful fragility of the craft, and these human hands doing their work. My movements became slow, precise, gentle. Not because I was careful, but because that's what the moment called for. It was the most peaceful I have ever been, in the most dangerous situation I have ever faced. She experienced the ultimate unity, not just unity of perception and action, but unity with existence itself. Her personal drama was swallowed by the cosmic scale, and in that swallowing, she found not insignificance, but profound peace. Her small self was gone, and in its place was a sense of participating in something majestic. That is Mushin at its most expansive, the complete forgetting of the separate self, not through loss, but through merging with a reality so immense that the self's concerns become irrelevant, and only a loving, attentive presence remains. This is the peace we touch in deep sleep, when the I vanishes entirely. And it's the peace that Mushin points to in waking life. A waking up from the dream of being a separate, struggling self into the reality of being an integral, conscious part of the whole. Let's continue by exploring how no mind meets one of the mind's greatest challenges, the storm of difficult emotion. We travel now to the calm eye of a different kind of storm, in the Bay of Bengal. There were fishermen who navigated the treacherous waters known for sudden, violent cyclones. An old captain, Arjun, had survived more storms than anyone could remember. When others would panic, lashing gear down in frenzy, shouting orders in fear, Arjun would become preternaturally calm. He'd station himself at the wheel, his breathing deep and even. His grandson, piloting his own boat now, asked him the secret. "Grandfather, when the wind screams and the waves are like mountains, how do you not feel terror? How do you know what to do?" Arjun pointed to the water in a glass on the table. He agitated it with his finger, creating a swirling storm in the miniature. "Where is the boat safest?" he asked. The grandson thought. "In the harbor, far from the storm." "No," Arjun said softly. "In the very center. The eye." He stopped agitating the glass. In the center, the water became still, while around the edges it still swirled. The storm has a center of perfect peace. Your mind is the same. When emotion comes, fear, anger, a great grief, it is a storm. If you fight the waves at the edge, you will be destroyed. If you try to outrun it, it may chase you. But every inner storm has an eye. Your work is not to stop the storm, but to find the still point within yourself and anchor there. From that place, you can see the storm clearly. You can feel its direction. Your hands on the wheel will know what to do, not from panic, but from the calm in the center. He described his practice. At the first sign of the storm, external or internal, he would feel his feet firmly on the deck. He would take one breath so deep it seemed to reach his toes. In that breath, he would find the silent, unmoving awareness behind the tumult of fear. He wouldn't argue with the fear. He would simply acknowledge, storm. And from the steady ground of that awareness, his actions, tying a line, adjusting course, would arise cleanly, efficiently, without the contamination of panic. This is no mind as the inner anchor. We cannot prevent emotional storms. Life guarantees them. Our suffering, however, comes not from the storm itself, but from our identification with it. We believe, I am afraid. Mushin offers a subtle but profound shift. Fear is present, and awareness is also present. By practicing resting as the awareness, we find the eye of the storm. From there, we can respond to the emotion or the external crisis with clarity, rather than being tossed by it. The emotion may still be powerful, but it is no longer the captain of your ship. This aligns with therapeutic modalities like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, which teaches psychological flexibility, the ability to feel difficult feelings fully while still choosing actions aligned with your values. This is essentially applying Mushin to emotional pain, letting the feeling be there, non-resistance, without letting it dictate your behavior, non-identification. So wiser action can emerge from a deeper place. Now, let's visit a story about precision born from letting go, set in a Swiss watchmaking atelier. Clara was a master watchmaker, repairing antique timepieces of exquisite complexity. The gears, some no larger than a pinhead, had to be handled with tweezers under a magnifying loupe. The slightest tremor, the tiniest overpressure, could bend a hairspring and ruin the mechanism. A novice, Emile, had steady hands but a restless mind. He would think, this piece is worth a fortune. Don't slip. Remember what happened last time. And invariably, his hand would develop a minute, frustrating shake. Clara observed him. You are trying to control your hand with your thoughts, she said. It is like trying to quiet a pond by pressing on the water. You must quiet the thinker. She had him perform a strange exercise before each delicate task. For 5 minutes, he was to sit and watch the second hand of a large wall clock, doing nothing else. Not counting seconds, not thinking about time. Just watching the smooth, relentless sweep. Let your mind become that sweep, she instructed. Empty, continuous, without past or future. Emile found it maddeningly boring. But he persisted. Slowly, the practice did something. The incessant mental chatter about performance and consequence faded into the background. His sense of self, so tightly wrapped around the outcome, loosened. He was just a pair of eyes watching a hand move. When he then approached the workbench, his state was different. He wasn't Emile the careful watchmaker. He was simply the space in which the watch and the tools came together. His hand, freed from the micromanagement of his anxious mind, became steady as a rock. The knowledge in his fingers, built from years of training, could now express itself without interference. He became a conduit for precision, not its straining source. This illustrates no mind as unobstructed skill. We train for skills, but then we often obstruct them with our self-consciousness, the watcher, who monitors, judges, and fears failure. This watcher creates tension, the very thing that ruins delicate work. Mushin is the dissolution of that watcher. In those moments, the skill you've ingrained expresses itself flawlessly, because nothing is in its way. The athlete isn't thinking about the shot, the musician isn't thinking about the finger placement, the speaker isn't thinking about how they sound. They are absorbed, and excellence flows. Let's shift from micro-precision to macro-vision, with a story from the world of strategy, in the Mongolian steppe. Centuries ago, a great Khan was known for his undefeated battle strategies. His enemies studied his formations, his troop movements, but could never predict him. A captured rival general, spared out of respect, finally asked him, "What is the source of your strategy? Do you have secret scrolls? Brilliant tacticians?" The Khan took him to a high hill overlooking the endless grassland. "What do you see?" he asked. "I see land, grass, sky." "My own defeat," the general said bitterly. The Khan shook his head. "I see the wind patterns in the grass, telling me the weather for 3 days." I see the slight discolorations that mark the best grazing, which tells me where the enemy's horses will be strongest. I see the lay of the land not as lines on a map, but as a body, its ridges like bones, its valleys like veins. My strategy does not come from thinking, "What shall I do?" It comes from seeing what is, so clearly that what to do becomes obvious. It is not a choice. It is a recognition. I am not a general fighting on the land. I am the land, deciding where the fight will be. He described his mind in council not as a room of shouting advisors, but as a still lake, reflecting the complete picture. The clever arguments, the fears, the boasts of his captains were like ripples on the surface. He would wait until the lake was still again, and the true reflection, the inevitable, right course of action, would be seen. This is no mind as strategic clarity. We often approach problems with frantic brainstorming, generating lists of pros and cons, wrestling with decisions. This is the mind operating at the surface. Mushin suggests a different path. First, become still. Take in all the information, not with analysis, but with open awareness. Let the situation imprint itself on your quiet mind. Often, the solution will then arise, not as a product of linear thought, but as a holistic insight, a pattern recognized. The decision makes itself. You don't choose it, you see it. This is the essence of wisdom in action. Now, let's bring this into the most intimate realm, healing. In a clinic in Iceland that used geothermal hot springs and nature immersion, there was a healer named Ellen. She didn't just treat ailments, she facilitated nature's realignment. Patients with chronic stress, anxiety, and pain would come. Her first step was always silence. She would lead them to a secluded hot spring and say, for the first hour, do not try to heal. Do not think about your pain. Just listen. Listen to the bubble of the geothermal vent. Feel the heat on your skin, the cold air on your face. Watch the steam rise and join the mist. Let the elements talk. Your body remembers this language. It is older than your worries. People would resist. They wanted to do something, to talk about their problems. But in the enforced silence, surrounded by primordial elements, something inevitable happened. The thinking mind, faced with this relentless, nonverbal reality, would gradually surrender. As one patient said, my problems, which felt like huge, complicated knots in my chest, started to feel small. Not unimportant, but small, like details in a vast landscape. The heat and the water and the silence were so much bigger. And my body, for the first time in years, just was. It wasn't a sick body or an anxious body. It was just a body in hot water, under a sky. The peace in that was the beginning of the healing. Ellen's role was not to fix, but to hold the space where individuals could remember their own wholeness, by forgetting their story of brokenness for a while. She helped them touch the state of Mushin, being without commentary, where the body's innate intelligence for balance could operate without the mind's interference. This reveals no mind as the foundation of healing. Much of our suffering is perpetuated by our narrative about it. This pain means X. This anxiety defines me. I am broken. These stories create tension and fear that often worsen the condition. Mushin creates a gap in that story. In that gap, The organism can simply be, and in that being, its self-regulating, homeostatic capacities can function optimally. It's not that thinking is bad, it's that compulsive, identificatory thinking can block the natural healing that wants to occur when we get out of the way. I witnessed a simple version of this with a friend plagued by tension headaches. She'd take pills, massage her temples, curse the pain. One day, in desperation, she just lay down and placed her attention fully on the sensation of the headache itself, without judgment or resistance. She described feeling into the pulsing ache with curious, gentle awareness. Within minutes, the headache began to dissolve. By meeting it with Mushin, open, non-resistant awareness. Instead of with fight or flight panic, her nervous system calmed, and the muscular tension that was causing the pain released. She didn't do anything but stop fighting. Finally, let's consider a story about the ultimate act of no mind, creation from nothing, from the world of theoretical physics. Dr. Eris Thorne was a physicist working on a fiendishly complex problem in quantum gravity. For years, he had attacked it with relentless logic, marathon coding sessions, and fierce debates. He hit wall after wall. Frustrated, he took a sabbatical to a remote cabin, with no books, no internet, just a notebook. For weeks, he did nothing but chop wood, walk, and stare at the lake. He let the problem go. Not strategically, but completely. His mind, deprived of its obsessive fuel, grew quiet. The grandiose identity of the brilliant physicist solving the big problem faded. One morning, he was simply watching sunlight dapple on water. There was no thought, just perception. And in that quiet, an image arose, not an equation, but a simple, elegant geometric form, like a knot of woven light. It appeared whole in his mind's eye. He didn't derive it, he saw it. He rushed to his notebook and began to sketch, then to translate the form into mathematics. It flowed effortlessly. He had, in a flash of stillness, perceived the architecture his years of thinking had been blindly fumbling toward. He later said, "I didn't solve it. I stopped, and the solution revealed itself to the silence I had become. All my thinking was just noise, shaking the delicate instrument that needed to be still in order to see." This is no mind as the source of insight. Our culture glorifies effort and grind. But breakthrough insights in science, art, and philosophy often come when the conscious, striving mind is offline, in the shower, on a walk, in dreams. This is the eureka moment. Mushin is the cultivation of that receptive, fertile silence. It's preparing the ground of your awareness through disciplined release, not through mental force, so that the seeds of insight, which come from a deeper place than the conscious mind, can take root and grow. From the emotional storm to the watchmaker's bench, from the strategist's hill to the physicist's lake, the thread is constant. Peace, clarity, and right action arise not from the mind's struggle, but from its wise surrender. Not from doing more, but from being fully, quietly present, and allowing what is already whole within you to express itself without obstruction. Now, let's turn our attention to a subtle but pervasive form of exhaustion, the fatigue of constant self-presentation. We leave the workshops and wild places for the curated world of a Parisian atelier. Dominique was a legendary fashion designer. His collections were celebrated not for their flamboyance, but for their startling authenticity, clothes that seemed to reveal the wearer's essence, not the designer's ego. A young, ambitious designer, Celeste, joined his studio. She was full of ideas, trends, and a burning desire to impress. Her initial sketches were clever, referencing art movements and social commentary. Dominique would glance at them and give a faint, unreadable smile. "They are very loud," he said once. Frustrated, Celeste worked harder, her mind a storm of concepts. Her designs became more convoluted. One afternoon, overwhelmed, she sat slumped at her desk. Dominique approached and, without a word, placed a single, perfect white pebble on her sketchbook. "What is this?" she asked, bewildered. "Your next collection," he said. He then gave her an apparently absurd task. For 1 week, she was to come to the atelier, sit at her desk, and do nothing but look at the pebble for 1 hour each morning. No sketching, no thinking about fashion. Just looking. The first day was agony. Her mind rebelled, "This is stupid. I'm wasting time. What will people think?" She saw only a rock. The second day, boredom set in. The third, a strange shift. As her mental resistance tired, her perception deepened. She noticed the pebble wasn't truly white, but held hints of gray, beige, even a faint blush of pink. She saw the elegant, water-smoothed curve of its form, the tiny, fascinating pits on its surface. She felt its cool, solid weight in her palm. It was no longer a generic pebble. It was a universe of subtlety, simplicity, and quiet integrity. When she finally returned to her sketches, her mind was clear of concepts. Her hand moved, and what flowed out were not ideas, but forms. Clean lines, drapes that followed the logic of the body, textures that whispered rather than shouted. The collection was a critical triumph, described as profoundly simple. Dominique nodded approval. "You stopped designing from here," he tapped her forehead, "and started seeing from here." He touched her chest. The pebble had no story to tell about itself. It was just what it was. When you saw that, you could create from that place of just what is, for the human body. You got out of your own way. This teaches no mind as authentic expression. We often create, work, and even speak from a place of self-consciousness. What will this say about me? Is this clever enough? Will they like it? This internal commentator, this performative self, is exhausting. Mushin in creation is the silencing of that commentator. It's becoming like the pebble, utterly itself, without a story. From that place of non-self-conscious being, true expression can flow. It's not about you anymore, it's about the truth of the thing you're creating or the moment you're inhabiting. The relief is immense. Let's journey to a setting where a different kind of performance is paramount, a Broadway theater. Helen was an actress known for her riveting, transparent performances. She could cry on stage night after night, and the tears felt shockingly real every time. An understudy, Leo, asked her secret. "How do you conjure the emotion, show after show, without it becoming a hollow technique?" Helen's answer was unexpected. "I don't conjure it. I get out of its way. The script, the character's situation, it's all a vessel. My job isn't to fill it with my idea of sadness. My job is to clean the vessel so perfectly, by quieting my own personal story, my nerves, my desire to be good, that the universal human experience of grief can pour through it. I am not Helen acting sad. I am a space where sadness, for those 2 hours, is allowed to exist truthfully. I feel it, yes, but I am not attached to it. It's not mine. It passes through. That's why it doesn't destroy me, and why it feels real. She described her pre-show ritual not as psyching herself up, but as winding herself down. She'd sit in her dressing room and practice letting go of Helen, her day, her worries, her ego. She'd arrive at a state of empty readiness. The stage was then not a place to prove herself, but a space to serve the truth of the play. This reveals no mind as selfless service to the moment. Whether in art, conversation, or any action, when we approach it with a me at the center, a me that wants to succeed, to be liked, to avoid failure, we add a layer of tension and falsity. Mushin is the practice of subtracting that me. What remains is a clear channel. The actor serves the play. The speaker serves the truth of what's being said. The listener serves the person speaking. This self-forgetfulness is not loss, it's liberation into a more direct, powerful, and effortless engagement with life. Now, let's explore a domain where the mind's interference is not just exhausting, but dangerous: emergency medicine. Dr. Evans worked in a busy urban ER. Chaos was the norm, multiple traumas, ringing alarms, overlapping voices. What marked him was not frantic energy, but a paradoxical calm. In the eye of the medical hurricane, he moved with a deliberate, unhurried precision that seemed to slow time itself. A new resident, Dr. Patel, full of textbook knowledge and adrenaline, found herself paralyzed by the cascade of decisions. She watched Dr. Evans. While others shouted, he spoke softly. While minds raced, his seemed focused to a needlepoint. After a particularly brutal shift, she asked him, "How are you so clear?" "My brain just seizes up." Dr. Evans offered a metaphor. The emergency is a loud, chaotic radio signal. If you try to listen to all the static, the music, the overlapping channels at once, you hear nothing but noise. You have to tune to one frequency at a time. My mind is the tuner. I don't fight the noise. I just tune it out. I place my entire awareness on the single most important datum, this pulse, this breath sound, this lab value. Everything else fades to a background hum. The decision of what to tune into isn't a frantic choice. It's an intuitive click that happens when I'm not trying to hear everything. He described his state not as hyperthinking, but as hyper-attending, a laser-like focus that excluded the peripheral panic. This focus wasn't strained, it was natural, arising from a deep, practiced trust in his training and his intuitive triage sense. The Dr. Evans, who was afraid of mistakes, who was worried about his reputation, was absent. Present was only a process of diagnosis and response, flowing from a quiet center. This demonstrates no mind as focused absorption. We often mistake focus for a tightening, a narrowing born of effort. True, deep focus is often a release, a letting go of all competing claims on your attention. It's the mind becoming so fully one with a single point that the self, with all its anxieties, disappears into the task. This is Mushin in high-stakes environments. The peace within it is the peace of having no choice, of being so completely engaged that there is no room for the internal commentator. The exhaustion of multitasking and diffuse anxiety is replaced by the clean fatigue of total, undivided engagement. Consider the neuroscience of flow and threat response. In a crisis, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, can hijack the prefrontal cortex, the thinking, planning center, leading to panic. Dr. Evans's practice of tuning is a conscious harnessing of attention to keep the prefrontal cortex online and focused, thereby regulating the amygdala's panic response. He is using directed, mindful focus, a form of Mushin, to maintain executive control. It's a practical, life-saving application of finding the eye of the storm. Let's move from saving lives to savoring life, in the heart of Tuscany. Sophia's grandmother, Nana Alma, was famous for her ragu. It simmered for 8 hours, filling the house with an aroma that was the very definition of home. Sophia, a successful chef in a high-pressure restaurant, came home wanting to crack the code. She measured, timed, documented every step with the rigor of a food scientist. Nana just smiled and stirred. Sophia's recreations were good, but they lacked the soul, the indefinable depth of Nana's. What's the secret ingredient? Sophia finally demanded. Is it a particular herb? A splash of wine at a specific time? Nana Alma took her hand and placed it on the worn handle of the wooden spoon. The secret is the ozio, she said. Ozio translates roughly to leisurely idleness, a positive, fertile stillness. You are cooking with your clock and your measuring cups. I am cooking with the afternoon. I taste when the tomatoes have given up their anger and become sweet. I listen to the bubble, a fast, angry bubble needs the flame lowered. A slow, contented plop says all is well. I am not making the ragu. I am keeping company with it while it makes itself. The love is in the attention, not in the ingredient. Sophia finally understood. She put away her timers. She pulled up a chair, sat by the pot, and just tended it. She watched the colors deepen, smelled the evolution of the scent. Her mind, free from its analytical mission, grew quiet and present. That day, her ragu finally tasted like Nana's. The secret ingredient was the quality of consciousness she brought to the process, a patient, loving, non-interfering awareness. This is no mind as the essence of nourishment. So much of what we do, even pleasurable things like cooking or eating, is done with a goal-oriented, distracted mind. We fuel our bodies while our minds are elsewhere. Mushin invites us to bring a contemplative, present-moment awareness to the acts of nourishment. When you eat with full attention, you taste more with less. When you cook with presence, the food carries that quality of care. It nourishes on a deeper level. The activity itself becomes restorative, not just a means to an end. I learned this from a friend who gardens. She once said, "The garden doesn't need you to figure it out. It needs you to show up and pay attention. Weeding isn't a chore when you're really there, it's a conversation with the soil. The relaxation is in the noticing, not in the finishing. Finally, let's contemplate a story about the most fundamental act of no mind, the transition into sleep itself, from the perspective of a lighthouse keeper on a stormy coast. Old Tom kept a lighthouse on a lonely, wave-battered island. His most vital task was to tend the light as darkness fell, a signal of safety for unseen ships. He described the process of falling asleep in that place of howling wind and crashing surf as a practice in trust. "You can't force sleep in a storm," he'd say. "Trying to is like trying to outshout the gale. It just makes you more awake." So, I do with my mind what I do with the light. The storm is the chaos of thoughts, worries, memories, the day's echoes. The light is my attention. I can't stop the storm, but I can keep the light steady. I focus on the simple, rhythmic turn of the lens, the steady glow of the flame. I become that rhythm. The thoughts blow through like wind, loud, dramatic, but passing. I don't board them up, I just keep tending the light. And sooner or later, the mind, like the sea, can't resist a steady rhythm. It begins to sink. The thoughts, without my fight, lose their power. They become just weather. And I slip quietly into the keeper's cottage of sleep, leaving the light to shine on by itself. His metaphor is perfect. We cannot control the storms of our mental weather. But we can choose where to place the steady light of our attention. On the breath. On a sensation. On an image of peace. Mushin at bedtime is not about emptying the mind, but about ceasing to struggle with its content. It's tending the gentle light of awareness until the rest of the system, trusting that light is on, can finally stand down and rest. From the performative self in Paris to the ER in chaos, from the Tuscan kitchen to the storm-lashed lighthouse, the path remains. Peace is found not in controlling the uncontrollable noise of life and mind, but in discovering and abiding in the controllable, steady light of your own silent, present awareness. That light, when tended, becomes the beacon that guides you home to rest. Now let's consider a realm where the mind's chatter is not just tiring, but can shatter a delicate balance. The high-wire act of diplomacy. Our story unfolds in the quiet halls of a United Nations annex, far from the spotlight. An elder diplomat, Ambassador Chen, was known as a silence weaver. In negotiations teetering on the brink of collapse, with voices raised and positions hardened, he would often remain quiet for long periods. He wasn't passive, his silence was active, profound. A junior attaché, Anya, frustrated by stalled talks, once asked him, "Sir, why don't you speak? They're arguing past each other." Chen poured tea for them both, his movements fluid and calm. "When the pond is churned up by arguing children," he said, "you cannot see the bottom. You cannot see what is actually there, the shared rock, the common root. If you jump in shouting, you add more mud. But if you are very still, the mud settles. Then you can see. My silence is not absence. It is the space for the mud to settle. In that settling, what is true and necessary often becomes visible to everyone. He described his inner state during these tense silences. I am not thinking of my next argument. I am not preparing a rebuttal. I am listening, not to their words, but to the space between the words. To the fear behind the anger, the need behind the demand. When I speak from that place of having listened to the silence, my words are not another stone thrown into the pond. They are a finger pointing to the rock everyone can now see. Anya observed him in the next session. As voices clashed, Chen simply sat, his posture relaxed, his gaze soft but attentive. The longer he was silent, the more the room's frantic energy seemed to bump against his stillness and lose its force. Eventually, the others, almost unconsciously, began to speak more slowly, to listen more. When Chen finally spoke, it was a single sentence that reframed the entire deadlock, not by imposing a new idea, but by articulating the shared concern that had been obscured by the noise. A path forward opened. This illustrates no mind as generative stillness. We believe that to influence a situation, we must add something, more words, more action, more force. Mushin reveals the power of subtraction, of creating a vacuum of non-reactivity. In that vacuum, clarity can precipitate. In conversation, in conflict, even within our own internal debates, a moment of true, non-judgmental silence, a pause in the mental commentary, allows a wiser perspective to emerge. It's not manipulation, it's the cultivation of a shared field of awareness where solutions can arise organically. Let's shift from the conference room to the infinite conference of the cosmos, through the eyes of a radio astronomer. Dr. Lena Volkov worked at a vast array of radio telescopes listening for signals from deep space. Her work was the ultimate exercise in patience, sifting an unimaginable amount of cosmic static for a whisper of patterned intelligence. The data was overwhelming, a roaring ocean of noise. Colleagues used sophisticated algorithms, hunting for anomalies. Lena had a different practice. Each night, she would take a raw, unprocessed feed from a single telescope aimed at a quiet patch of sky and simply listen to it through headphones, converted into audible sound. It was a hiss, a roar, a chaotic, featureless blast. Why? A colleague asked. The AI can process petabytes in seconds. You'll never hear anything in that. I'm not listening for a signal, Lena explained. I'm listening to the silence. Or rather, to what we call noise. To know the signal, you must know the silence that holds it. You must become intimate with the texture of nothing. Your algorithms look for spikes against a baseline they ignore. I am learning the baseline. It has a personality. Over months, the cosmic hiss became not a monotonous roar, but a rich tapestry of subtle variations, shifts in texture, minute pulses buried in the roar. Her mind, through patient, non-seeking attention, had learned to discern patterns no algorithm was programmed to find. She wasn't analyzing, she was communing with the silence of space. And one night, she heard it, a repeating, harmonic pulse so faint it was like a single clear chime in a hurricane. It wasn't a shout, it was a whisper from the deep quiet. She had heard it because she had first learned to listen to the quiet itself. This reveals no mind as deep listening. Our attention is usually goal-oriented, listening for what we want to hear, seeing what we expect to see. This creates a filter that blocks out most of reality. Mushin is listening without a goal. It's opening the aperture of awareness completely. In that state, you perceive not just the obvious signals, but the full context, the background field. You hear the message and the silence that gives it meaning. This applies to listening to a loved one, to your own body, to the world around you. The truth is often not in the loudest signal, but in the subtle patterns within the quiet. Now, let's ground this in the most tactile of arts, pottery, in a studio in rural Catalonia. An old potter, Josep, worked at his kick-wheel, throwing identical, beautiful clay vessels for the local olive oil. His grandson, Mathieu, a conceptual artist, visited and was bored by the repetition. "Grandfather, you've made 10,000 of these. Don't you want to create something new? Express yourself." Josep didn't pause his rhythmic kicking. The spinning clay rose and curved under his hands as if by magic. "I am not expressing myself," he said. "I am disappearing. Look." He lifted his hands away for a moment. The wheel spun, the perfect form holding its shape. The clay, the wheel, the water, the centripetal force, they want to make this shape. My hands are just the gentle suggestion. If I think, now I express myself, I put a wobble in the wall. If I am just present, the universe makes a pot through these old hands. The beauty is not in my expression, but in my absence. The pot is not mine. It belongs to the spinning. He had Mathieu sit at the wheel. Mathieu's mind was full of ideas for shapes, angry, jagged, expressive forms. He tried to impose them on the clay. It collapsed, slumped, fought back. Josep placed his hands over Mathieu's. "Close your eyes. Feel the spin. Feel the cool, wet clay. Don't make. Let the spin make. Your job is to be empty and feel when the clay is in harmony with the spin." When Mathieu finally surrendered, stopped trying to be an artist, and simply became a sensitive participant in the physics of the moment, a simple, graceful cylinder emerged. It was the most honest thing he'd ever made. He felt a peace deeper than any he'd felt after a praised exhibition. He had touched the state where craft becomes meditation, and doing becomes being. This is no mind as unity with process. We often stand apart from our actions, directing them like a foreman. This creates a sense of strain and separation. Mushin is the dissolution of that separation. You become one with the action, the potter is the wheel, the clay, the spin. There is no director, only the directed activity unfolding spontaneously. This unity is a source of profound peace and effortless mastery. It turns work into a moving meditation. The Japanese concept of shuhari describes this progression in mastery. Shu, obey the form, ha, break the form, ri, transcend the form. Ri is essentially mushin, where the practice is so internalized it disappears, and the artist acts from a place of unconscious, fluid unity with the art. Let's move from physical craft to the craft of thought itself, in the hushed reading room of the Library of Alexandria, in its modern incarnation. A philosopher, Professor Hassan, was writing a book on the nature of consciousness. He was stuck, trapped in circular arguments between competing theories. His mind was a battleground of isms. He decided on a different approach. He stopped reading new papers. Instead, he began to copy out, by longhand, ancient texts on awareness from different traditions: Greek, Indian, Chinese, Sufi. Not to analyze, but to transcribe. The physical act of writing, the slow formation of each letter, absorbed his conscious mind. The furious debate in his head began to quiet, replaced by the rhythm of the pen. He wasn't thinking about the words' meaning, he was merely being their scribe. Weeks into this, something shifted. As he copied a line from a Taoist text, the mind of the sage is like a mirror, it grasps nothing and refuses nothing. The meaning didn't arrive as an intellectual concept. It landed as a direct experience. His own mind, emptied of its warring content through the humble act of copying, became that mirror for a moment, clear, still, simply reflecting. The intellectual knot he'd been trying to untie dissolved. The insight that emerged for his book wasn't a new argument, but a simple pointing to that mirror-like nature of awareness itself. He had to stop thinking about consciousness to briefly be conscious in its purest form, and from that place, understanding dawned. This demonstrates no mind as transcendent inquiry. Sometimes, the answer to a question cannot be found by the part of the mind that asked it. The thinking mind can only rearrange existing knowledge. True insight comes from a leap beyond thought. Practices that occupy the conscious mind with a simple, repetitive task, walking, knitting, copying, can quiet the analytical engine just enough for the intuitive, holistic mind to offer its solution. You don't think your way to Mushin. You create the conditions for it, and understanding arises as a gift. Finally, let's return to the most universal human experience, learning to walk. Watch a toddler. There is no self-consciousness. There is a goal, that shiny thing, a wobbly body, and total, absorbed engagement. The child doesn't think, left foot, shift weight, now right foot, maintain balance. The child is walking. Falling is part of the flow, it's data, not failure. There is no, I am a walker, story. There is just walking. We all passed through this state of natural Mushin as we learned our most fundamental skills. Then, we built a self around them, and with it, a commentator. I am a good walker. I hope I don't trip. The pure act became laden with identity and fear. The practice of no mind, in a way, is a return to that toddler's mind, not in ignorance, but in wisdom. It's the unlearning of self-consciousness to recover the freedom of absorbed action. It's letting go of the story about what you're doing, and just doing it. Whether negotiating peace, listening to the stars, throwing a pot, or solving a philosophical riddle, the path to peace and mastery is the same, a gentle, persistent return to that state of undivided being, where the doer dissolves into the deed. From the diplomat's strategic silence to the toddler's first steps, the principle echoes: what you seek is not something to be added to your experience. It is the lived reality that appears when you subtract the layers of mental interference, and meet this moment, and the next, with a quiet, open, and undivided heart. Let's explore now how no mind meets one of the thinking mind's most seductive traps, the labyrinth of memory and regret. We find our story not in a library of archives, but in the living archives of the Amazon rainforest. An ethnobotanist, Dr. Mateo Silva, lived with an indigenous tribe for years, learning their vast knowledge of medicinal plants. The elder, Taya, was a living library of this wisdom. Mateo noticed something remarkable. When Taya shared a use for a specific vine or leaf, he didn't recount it as a fact from the past. He would close his eyes, touch the plant, and his voice would change. He seemed to be inhabiting the knowledge, not recalling it. "Uncle," Mateo asked, "when you tell of the ayahuasca vine, you speak as if you are there with the first shaman who learned its secret." Taya smiled. "For you, memory is a thing back there," he pointed behind him. "A picture in a book you take down and look at. For me, memory is a root in the earth, here." He placed a hand on the ground. "When I speak of the vine, I do not go back to fetch the story. I let the story's root, which is here now, send its shoot up through me. I become the story telling itself again. There is no me then and me now. There is only the knowing, present." He contrasted this with regret or nostalgia. When a man is bitten by regret, he is trying to live in a root that has rotted. He digs and digs at a dead thing. But the present root, the one under his feet right now, he ignores. So he starves in a field full of food. For Taya, functional memory was not a mental replay but a present moment resonance with the living fabric of knowledge. Trauma or regret occurred when the mind got stuck trying to relive a past moment as a separate me, creating a phantom limb of the psyche. His practice of Mushin with memory was to feel its truth in the now, without the divisive storyline of a separate past self. This reveals no mind as living memory. We treat memory as a recording, and our mind as a projector, constantly replaying edited highlights, or lowlights. This creates a schism between a me that experienced and a me that remembers, often with judgment. Mushin offers a more holistic relationship with the past. It's the ability to access the wisdom or the feeling of an experience without reigniting the drama of the separate self who lived it. It's touching the essence of the memory, its lesson, its beauty, its pain. As a current reality in your consciousness, without getting lost in the mental movie. This transforms regret into learning and nostalgia into grateful presence. Now, let's enter a domain where the past is physically present and must be engaged with flawless intuition, jazz, in a smoky club in New Orleans. A saxophonist, Leo Prez Johnson, could take a standard tune and weave solos that felt both inevitable and utterly surprising. A young pianist, Maya, studied his every phrase, trying to decode his style. She noticed something odd. In the middle of a blazing fast run, Prez would sometimes close his eyes, and his face would go completely slack, as if he'd fallen asleep. Yet the music that poured out was more inventive than ever. After the set, she asked him, "When you close your eyes like that, where do you go? Are you visualizing chords?" Prez laughed, a low, warm sound. "Child, I go nowhere. That's the point. When I close my eyes, I'm turning off the lights in the control room. All the rules, the scales I practiced, the licks I know, they're all in that room. When it's dark, I can't see them. Then, the only thing left is the music itself, wanting to move. I just get out of its way. I'm not playing the saxophone. I'm listening for the next note, and my fingers, they're better friends with the horn than my brain is. They know the way home. He described his knowledge of music not as a library in his head, but as a landscape in his body. Thinking was like trying to navigate that landscape with a map. When he stopped thinking, he was the landscape, and movement through it was natural, pathless. The sleep face was the look of Mushin, the conscious mind in abeyance, allowing the embodied intelligence of deep practice to speak directly. This is no mind as spontaneous composition. Creativity under pressure often fails when the conscious mind seizes control, trying to be creative. True spontaneity arises from a ground of mastered skills that have been so thoroughly internalized they are preconscious. Then, in the moment, the mind gets out of the way, and creation happens through you. It's not you making something up, it's something expressing itself through the instrument of your acquired skill and your surrendered awareness. The exhaustion of trying to be clever is replaced by the exhilaration of witnessing what wants to be born. Let's move from artistic to physical spontaneity, in the dojos of Okinawa, the birthplace of karate. An old sensei, Kano, taught a principle called Mushin no Shin, mind of no mind. In sparring, he was untouchable. Students would attack with well-trained combinations, but he would evade or deflect with movements that seemed simple, almost lazy, yet always perfectly timed. A diligent student, Hiro, trained his reflexes relentlessly. He could block a predetermined attack sequence flawlessly. But in free sparring with the sensei, he was always a half step behind, caught by attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. "Sensei," Hiro asked, breathing hard, "how do you see the attack before it even forms?" Kano had him stand in a ready stance. "You are waiting for the punch," Kano said. "You see the fist, then you block. This is slow. Do not look at my fist. Do not look at my eyes. Look at my center." He placed a hand on his own solar plexus. The movement begins here, in the intention, before the limb moves. If you wait to see the limb, you are already late. Empty your mind of blocking and attacking. Fill it with nothing but my presence. Then, you will feel the intention to move before I do. Your response will not be a thought, it will be an echo. He was teaching Hiro to perceive from a state of Mushin. A receptive, non-anticipatory awareness that could sense the emerging shape of action in the present moment, rather than reacting to its completed form. Hiro's problem was that his mind was full of techniques, which created a filter. He was seeing through his knowledge, not seeing what is. When he finally managed to quiet his mind and simply be present with his opponent, he began to feel the fight as a flowing dance of energy, not a series of discrete problems to solve. His movements became fluid, timely, and far less exhausting. This demonstrates no mind as preemptive awareness. In life, we often respond to crises only when they are fully formed: the angry outburst, the missed deadline, the illness. We operate on reaction time. Mushin cultivates a sensitivity to the nascent stages, the subtle shifts in energy and intention, in a project, a relationship, our own body. From a quiet mind, we can feel the intention to move in a situation and adjust with minimal effort, avoiding the collision altogether. This is the essence of grace under pressure. Now, to a modern laboratory studying this very phenomenon. A research team at a neuroscience institute was studying expert versus novice martial artists using fMRI. They showed both groups videos of sparring matches, paused at random points, and asked what would happen next. Novices' brains lit up in areas associated with conscious analysis and motor planning. They were thinking about the options. The experts' brains showed something different: rapid, subconscious activity in the visual and sensoromotor cortex, and a notable quieting of the prefrontal cortex, the area of conscious deliberation. They weren't thinking, they were seeing the solution directly. When asked, they often couldn't verbalize how they knew, they just knew. The researchers concluded that mastery involves transferring skill from the slow, conscious processing system to the fast, intuitive, subconscious system. This transfer is essentially the cultivation of Mushin, the bypassing of the deliberative mind for direct, embodied knowing. This brings us to a story about the most common failure of the deliberative mind, stage fright, but in an unexpected venue, a stand-up comedy club in Berlin. Clara was a brilliant writer but terrified of performing her own material. On stage, her mind would split. One part would deliver the joke, another part would hover above, criticizing. That delivery was flat. They're not laughing. You're bombing. This split, the performer and the vicious critic, killed all timing and authenticity. An older comic, Dieter, took her aside. "Your problem is you are in the audience," he said. "You have left the stage and are sitting out there, watching yourself. You must occupy only the stage." How? You must fall in love with the telling, not the effect. His advice was counterintuitive: forget the punchline. The punchline will take care of itself. Love the setup. Be completely inside the truth of the story you are telling in this moment, the sentence you are saying right now. If you are fully inside the truth of the setup, the punchline will appear on time, and it will be true, and it will land. If you are thinking about the punchline while doing the setup, you are divided, and the audience feels the lie. Clara tried it. She stopped caring about laughs. She focused entirely on the reality of the anecdote as she spoke it, living it again in the present moment. The critic, having no job if she wasn't monitoring the effect, faded away. Her delivery became grounded, authentic. And the laughs came, deeper and more genuine than before. She discovered that the joy wasn't in the laugh, but in the undivided act of sharing a true moment. The laugh was just a shared echo of that truth. This is no mind as undivided presence in performance. Any performance, public speaking, teaching, leading a meeting, falters when we leave the present moment to monitor ourselves or the audience's reaction. Mushin is the full occupation of the role. You are not a person giving a speech, you are the speech giving itself. You are not a leader running a meeting, you are the meeting's focused progression. This total immersion is both powerful and peaceful. The anxiety of self-consciousness is replaced by the calm of complete engagement. Finally, let's visit a story about the end of all doing, in a hospice in the English countryside. A volunteer, Mr. Ellis, had a peculiar gift. He could sit with the dying, and without saying much, a profound calm would often settle in the room. A nurse once asked him, "What do you say to them? How do you bring that peace?" Mr. Ellis thought, "I don't bring anything. I take something away. I take away the need to fix, to reassure, to say the right thing. I sit, and I let myself be as empty as I can. I am not thinking, this is sad, or what should I do? I am just a space. A quiet space for them to be exactly as they are, afraid, angry, sad, or simply tired. In that space, which has no judgment, no agenda, they often stop fighting. They can just be. And in that, just being, there is a peace that is already there, underneath the struggle. I didn't put it there. I just stopped covering it up with my own mental noise." He described his state as one of hollow attention. He wasn't focused on the dying person, nor on himself. His attention was like a cleared room, available for whatever needed to be present. In that hollow, sacred space, the ultimate Mushin, the dividing line between self and other, helper and helped, even life and death, would often softly blur, revealing a fundamental, shared stillness. This points to no mind as ultimate compassion. The deepest comfort we can offer another human being is not our thoughts, our solutions, or even our empathy. It is our undisturbed, silent presence. It is our own state of Mushin, a mind free of fear, judgment, and agenda. That becomes a sanctuary for another soul. In that sanctuary, they can lay down the burden of their own story, if only for a moment, and rest in the simple, undeniable fact of being. This is peace, not as an achievement, but as a shared, wordless recognition of what we fundamentally are, beneath all stories. From the rainforest elder's living memory to the comedian's present moment truth, from the martial artist's preemptive flow to the hospice volunteer's hollow compassion, the practice is unified. It is a gentle, persistent return from the distracting narratives of the mind to the silent, spacious, and healing reality of now. Let's now consider how no mind navigates the terrain of knowledge itself, not as accumulation, but as recognition. We travel to the cool, shadowy scriptorium of a medieval monastery in the mountains of Armenia. Brother Mikhail was a scribe and illuminator of sacred texts. His primary task was exact replication, copying the Gospels letter by letter, error-free. But his passion was the margins, where he'd illuminate letters with breathtaking miniature scenes. A young novice, Aram, watched in awe. Mikhail's scenes weren't just decorative, they seemed to breathe the spirit of the text. "Brother," Aram asked, "how do you decide what scene to paint around the of Amen?" Mikael set down his fine brush. I do not decide, he said. First, I copy the text. I become the text. My hand moves, the words form. I am not thinking of their meaning. I am the flow of the ink. Then, when I come to the letter to be illuminated, I stop. I look at the empty space around it. I wait. I do not think of scenes from the Bible. I let the letter itself suggest its landscape. This is a mountain. This is a womb of light. The painting is already hidden in the marriage of the letter and the parchment. My job is to get quiet enough to see it, and steady enough to uncover it. He distinguished between knowledge of the Bible and knowledge from the Bible. The first was in his memory, the second arose in the silent dialogue between his surrendered attention and the work before him. His illuminations were not illustrations of what he knew, but revelations of what he saw when his knowing mind was still. This teaches no mind as insightful perception. We often approach a task or a problem with our stored knowledge front and center, projecting what we already know onto the situation. Mushin is the discipline of first setting that knowledge aside, like setting down a full cup to receive fresh tea. You meet the situation, the letter, the problem, the person, with empty, receptive awareness. From that emptiness, a fresh, often more profound understanding can emerge, one that includes your knowledge but is not limited by its categories. True insight is not a rearrangement of old furniture, it's a new window appearing in the room. Now, let's move to a field where knowledge must be instantly applicable under extreme conditions: wildfire fighting in the American West. A hotshot cruise superintendent, Val, had an uncanny sense for fire behavior. She could look at a wall of flame, the lay of the land, the feel of the wind on her neck, and intuitively know where the fire would go, where to cut a line, when to retreat. She called it listening to the dragon. A new recruit, Jake, trained on fire science models, fuel moisture, slope percent, Haynes index. Yet on the fire line, faced with the roaring, living chaos, the models would collapse in his mind. He'd freeze. Val took him aside during a respite. "Your models are the map," she yelled over the wind. "The fire is the land. You're staring at the map while the land is moving under your feet. Put the map away. Look. Smell. Feel the heat on this side of your face versus that side. See how the smoke leans, that's the wind's real story, not what the weather radio says. The dragon is talking to you right now. Your brain is too loud to hear it." For Val, expertise wasn't about carrying complex models in her head, but about having internalized the principles so completely that they became sensory perception. Her mind in action was not analytical, it was synesthetic, translating the sight of smoke, the smell of burning pine, the sting of heat on her skin into an immediate, bodily knowing of the fire's intent. This was Mushin in a life-or-death context. The total fusion of trained intuition with present-moment reality, with no space for discursive thought. This illustrates no mind as embodied expertise. High-stakes mastery in fluid, dynamic environments, firefighting, surgery, combat, often follows this pattern. The conscious, thinking mind is too slow. The knowledge must live in the nerves, the senses, the reflexes. Mushin is the state where this embodied expertise is in the driver's seat, unimpeded by the backseat driving of the conscious, doubting mind. The peace within it is the peace of perfect adaptation, the absence of inner conflict about what to do. Consider the concept of tacit knowledge, developed by philosopher Michael Polanyi. He famously stated, "We know more than we can tell." The knowledge of how to ride a bike, of a firefighter's intuition, of a scribe's illuminative insight. This is tacit knowledge. It cannot be fully captured in manuals or rules. It is learned through doing and dwelling within the practice. Mushin is the state in which this tacit knowledge operates freely, without the interference of the mind trying to tell it or control it. Let's shift from elemental danger to elemental nourishment, in a vineyard in Burgundy. An old vigneron, Pierre, could taste a wine from a single barrel and predict its evolution decades ahead. Enologists with their spectrophotometers and chemical analyses would arrive at similar conclusions, but Pierre's process was different. He would pour a taste, swirl, and then sit with his eyes closed for a full minute, silent. "What are you looking for in that silence, monsieur?" a young wine student asked. "I am not looking," Pierre said. "I am allowing the wine to introduce itself. First, I let my mouth forget the last wine it tasted. I let my mind forget what I know about this vintage, this terroir. I become a blank page. Then, I sip. The first is just shock, alcohol, acid. But in the silence after the swallow, that is where the wine speaks. The finish. It tells its story of soil, sun, and rain in the long echo it leaves. If I am thinking, is this enough tannin? Where is the fruit? I missed the story. I must be silent to hear the ghost of the wine." His judgment was not a checklist. It was a holistic impression that arose in the quiet space he created after the sensory input. That impression, the ghost, was his guide for blending and aging. His expertise was not just in his palate, but in his cultivated inner silence, which allowed for a deeper perception. This is no mind as contemplative discernment. In a world saturated with information and stimulus, discernment, the ability to judge well, is often clouded by noise. We judge too quickly, based on first impressions or pre-existing categories. Mushin suggests a pause, an intentional creation of inner silence after the data is received. In that pause, a more nuanced, holistic understanding can integrate and surface. Whether tasting wine, considering a job offer, or navigating a relationship conflict, creating that inner silent space after the initial taste allows for a wiser response to emerge from the depths of your being, not just the surface of your reactions. Now, to a story about the most fundamental kind of knowledge, knowing what is enough. In a bustling megacity in Southeast Asia, a rickshaw driver named Samnang had a peculiar routine. He worked from dawn until mid-afternoon, then stopped. He would park his rickshaw in a shaded spot, eat his lunch, and then nap or simply watch the city flow by. No matter how many fares he might have gotten in the evening, he never worked past his chosen time. A foreign businessman, constantly striving, once asked him, "Why do you stop? The evening rush is the most profitable time. You could double your earnings." Samnang smiled. "If I work all day, my back hurts, my mind is angry at the traffic, and I bring that tired anger home to my family. I earn enough for our needs and a little for joy. If I try to earn double, I will pay with double of my peace. That is a bad trade. My body knows when it is full. My mind knows when it is tired. I listen to them. The secret to not being poor in spirit is to know when you already have enough." His wisdom was a lived Mushin. He didn't let the societal story of more is better or the anxious thoughts about future lack override the clear, present moment signals from his body and his heart. His enough was not a number calculated by his mind, but a felt sense of equilibrium known by his whole being. In stopping, he preserved the quality of his life and his consciousness. He was rich in time, peace, and presence, currencies often devalued by the striving mind. This reveals no mind as knowing enough. The thinking mind, fueled by fear and comparison, is inherently insatiable. It always sees what's missing, what could be next. Mushin, rooted in present moment awareness, has a different compass. It feels the reality of the body's limits, the heart's contentment, the simple sufficiency of this breath, this meal, this day's work. From that felt sense, the natural, wise action of enough arises effortlessly. It's not deprivation. It's the deep satisfaction of alignment with your actual needs, freeing immense energy otherwise wasted on the treadmill of more. Finally, let's contemplate a story about the end of seeking knowledge altogether, set in the digital age. A renowned AI researcher, Dr. Eris, had built models that could mimic human creativity, write poetry, compose music. Yet, he felt a growing emptiness. The more his creations amazed the world, the more he felt like a mechanic tinkering with a beautiful, but dead, engine. He took a solitary trip to a desert, a place with no signal, no data. One night, under an infinite spill of stars, the sheer silence and scale of it shattered something in him. The mental library of algorithms, data structures, and theories, the edifice of his knowledge, seemed like a tiny, frantic sandcastle next to this ocean of reality. In that humbling silence, a different kind of knowing washed over him. It wasn't knowledge about anything. It was the direct, wordless knowing of being a conscious part of this immense, mysterious whole. The compulsion to figure it out, to model it, to capture it in code, simply fell away. He sat for hours, knowing nothing, and yet feeling an understanding deeper than any he'd ever coded. When he returned, he didn't abandon his work. But his relationship to it changed. He no longer saw himself as a creator of intelligence, but as a participant in a mystery far greater. His work became more playful, more curious, less driven by ego. He had touched the Mushin that exists before and after all knowledge, the simple, awe-filled awareness of being itself. From that place, his creativity, unburdened by the need to be smart or significant, actually deepened. This points to no mind as the ground of knowing. All our conceptual knowledge is a shimmer on the surface of a vast ocean of unknowing, of pure being. We suffer when we mistake the shimmer for the ocean. Mushin is the willingness to sink beneath the surface of concepts, into the silent, boundless depth of direct experience. From that depth, all true creativity and wisdom ultimately spring. It is the home we left when we began to name things, and the home we can return to whenever we quiet the naming, categorizing, accumulating mind. From the scribe's receptive illumination to the firefighter's fused intuition, from the vigneron's silent tasting to the rickshaw driver's knowing of enough, we see that the deepest knowledge is not something we hold in our minds. It is a state of being, a clear, quiet, and fully embodied presence, from which right action, true discernment, and authentic peace naturally arise. Let's now consider how no mind navigates the terrain of knowledge itself, not as accumulation, but as recognition. We travel to the cool, shadowy scriptorium of a medieval monastery in the mountains of Armenia. Brother Mikhail was a scribe and illuminator of sacred texts. His primary task was exact replication, copying the Gospels letter by letter, error-free. But his passion was the margins, where he'd illuminate letters with breathtaking miniature scenes. A young novice, Aram, watched in awe. Mikhail's scenes weren't just decorative, they seemed to breathe the spirit of the text. Brother, Aram asked, how do you decide what scene to paint around the of Amen? Mikhail set down his fine brush. I do not decide, he said. First, I copy the text. I become the text. My hand moves, the words form. I am not thinking of their meaning. I am the flow of the ink. Then, when I come to the letter to be illuminated, I stop. I look at the empty space around it. I wait. I do not think of scenes from the Bible. I let the letter itself suggest its landscape. This is a mountain. This is a womb of light. The painting is already hidden in the marriage of the letter and the parchment. My job is to get quiet enough to see it, and steady enough to uncover it. He distinguished between knowledge of the Bible and knowledge from the Bible. The first was in his memory, the second arose in the silent dialogue between his surrendered attention and the work before him. His illuminations were not illustrations of what he knew, but revelations of what he saw when his knowing mind was still. This teaches no mind as insightful perception. We often approach a task or a problem with our stored knowledge front and center, projecting what we already know onto the situation. Mushin is the discipline of first setting that knowledge aside, like setting down a full cup to receive fresh tea. You meet the situation, the letter, the problem, the person, with empty, receptive awareness. From that emptiness, a fresh, often more profound understanding can emerge, one that includes your knowledge but is not limited by its categories. True insight is not a rearrangement of old furniture, it's a new window appearing in the room. Now, let's move to a field where knowledge must be instantly applicable under extreme conditions: wildfire fighting in the American West. A hotshot cruise superintendent, Val, had an uncanny sense for fire behavior. She could look at a wall of flame, the lay of the land, the feel of the wind on her neck, and intuitively know where the fire would go, where to cut a line, when to retreat. She called it listening to the dragon. A new recruit, Jake, trained on fire science models, fuel moisture, slope percent, Haynes index. Yet on the fire line, faced with the roaring, living chaos, the models would collapse in his mind. He'd freeze. Val took him aside during a respite. "Your models are the map," she yelled over the wind. "The fire is the land. You're staring at the map while the land is moving under your feet. Put the map away. Look. Smell. Feel the heat on this side of your face versus that side. See how the smoke leans, that's the wind's real story, not what the weather radio says. The dragon is talking to you right now. Your brain is too loud to hear it." For Val, expertise wasn't about carrying complex models in her head, but about having internalized the principles so completely that they became sensory perception. Her mind in action was not analytical, it was synesthetic, translating the sight of smoke, the smell of burning pine, the sting of heat on her skin into an immediate, bodily knowing of the fire's intent. This was Mushin in a life-or-death context. The total fusion of trained intuition with present-moment reality, with no space for discursive thought. This illustrates no mind as embodied expertise. High-stakes mastery in fluid, dynamic environments, firefighting, surgery, combat, often follows this pattern. The conscious, thinking mind is too slow. The knowledge must live in the nerves, the senses, the reflexes. Mushin is the state where this embodied expertise is in the driver's seat, unimpeded by the backseat driving of the conscious, doubting mind. The peace within it is the peace of perfect adaptation, the absence of inner conflict about what to do. Consider the concept of tacit knowledge, developed by philosopher Michael Polanyi. He famously stated, "We know more than we can tell." The knowledge of how to ride a bike, of a firefighter's intuition, of a scribe's illuminative insight. This is tacit knowledge. It cannot be fully captured in manuals or rules. It is learned through doing and dwelling within the practice. Mushin is the state in which this tacit knowledge operates freely, without the interference of the mind trying to tell it or control it. Let's shift from elemental danger to elemental nourishment, in a vineyard in Burgundy. An old vigneron, Pierre, could taste a wine from a single barrel and predict its evolution decades ahead. Enologists with their spectrophotometers and chemical analyses would arrive at similar conclusions, but Pierre's process was different. He would pour a taste, swirl, and then sit with his eyes closed for a full minute, silent. "What are you looking for in that silence, monsieur?" a young wine student asked. "I am not looking," Pierre said. "I am allowing the wine to introduce itself. First, I let my mouth forget the last wine it tasted. I let my mind forget what I know about this vintage, this terroir. I become a blank page. Then, I sip. The first is just shock, alcohol, acid. But in the silence after the swallow, that is where the wine speaks. The finish. It tells its story of soil, sun, and rain in the long echo it leaves. If I am thinking, is this enough tannin? Where is the fruit? I missed the story. I must be silent to hear the ghost of the wine. His judgment was not a checklist. It was a holistic impression that arose in the quiet space he created after the sensory input. That impression, the ghost, was his guide for blending and aging. His expertise was not just in his palate, but in his cultivated inner silence, which allowed for a deeper perception. This is no mind as contemplative discernment. In a world saturated with information and stimulus, discernment, the ability to judge well, is often clouded by noise. We judge too quickly, based on first impressions or pre-existing categories. Mushin suggests a pause, an intentional creation of inner silence after the data is received. In that pause, a more nuanced, holistic understanding can integrate and surface. Whether tasting wine, considering a job offer, or navigating a relationship conflict, creating that inner silent space after the initial taste allows for a wiser response to emerge from the depths of your being, not just the surface of your reactions. Now, to a story about the most fundamental kind of knowledge, knowing what is enough. In a bustling megacity in Southeast Asia, a rickshaw driver named Samnang had a peculiar routine. He worked from dawn until mid-afternoon, then stopped. He would park his rickshaw in a shaded spot, eat his lunch, and then nap or simply watch the city flow by. No matter how many fares he might have gotten in the evening, he never worked past his chosen time. A foreign businessman, constantly striving, once asked him, "Why do you stop?" "The evening rush is the most profitable time. You could double your earnings." Samnang smiled. "If I work all day, my back hurts, my mind is angry at the traffic, and I bring that tired anger home to my family. I earn enough for our needs and a little for joy. If I try to earn double, I will pay with double of my peace. That is a bad trade. My body knows when it is full. My mind knows when it is tired. I listen to them. The secret to not being poor in spirit is to know when you already have enough." His wisdom was a lived Mushin. He didn't let the societal story of more is better, or the anxious thoughts about future lack override the clear, present moment signals from his body and his heart. His enough was not a number calculated by his mind, but a felt sense of equilibrium known by his whole being. In stopping, he preserved the quality of his life and his consciousness. He was rich in time, peace, and presence, currencies often devalued by the striving mind. This reveals no mind as knowing enough. The thinking mind, fueled by fear and comparison, is inherently insatiable. It always sees what's missing, what could be next. Mushin, rooted in present moment awareness, has a different compass. It feels the reality of the body's limits, the heart's contentment, the simple sufficiency of this breath, this meal, this day's work. From that felt sense, the natural, wise action of enough arises effortlessly. It's not deprivation. It's the deep satisfaction of alignment with your actual needs, freeing immense energy otherwise wasted on the treadmill of more. Finally, let's contemplate a story about the end of seeking knowledge altogether, set in the digital age. A renowned AI researcher, Dr. Eris, had built models that could mimic human creativity, write poetry, compose music. Yet, he felt a growing emptiness. The more his creations amazed the world, the more he felt like a mechanic tinkering with a beautiful, but dead, engine. He took a solitary trip to a desert, a place with no signal, no data. One night, under an infinite spill of stars, the sheer silence and scale of it shattered something in him. The mental library of algorithms, data structures, and theories, the edifice of his knowledge, seemed like a tiny, frantic sandcastle next to this ocean of reality. In that humbling silence, a different kind of knowing washed over him. It wasn't knowledge about anything. It was the direct, wordless knowing of being a conscious part of this immense, mysterious whole. The compulsion to figure it out, to model it, to capture it in code, simply fell away. He sat for hours, knowing nothing, and yet feeling an understanding deeper than any he'd ever coded. When he returned, he didn't abandon his work. But his relationship to it changed. He no longer saw himself as a creator of intelligence, but as a participant in a mystery far greater. His work became more playful, more curious, less driven by ego. He had touched the Mushin that exists before and after all knowledge, the simple, awe-filled awareness of being itself. From that place, his creativity, unburdened by the need to be smart or significant, actually deepened. This points to no mind as the ground of knowing. All our conceptual knowledge is a shimmer on the surface of a vast ocean of unknowing, of pure being. We suffer when we mistake the shimmer for the ocean. Mushin is the willingness to sink beneath the surface of concepts, into the silent, boundless depth of direct experience. From that depth, all true creativity and wisdom ultimately spring. It is the home we left when we began to name things, and the home we can return to whenever we quiet the naming, categorizing, accumulating mind. From the scribe's receptive illumination to the firefighter's fused intuition, from the vigneron's silent tasting to the rickshaw driver's knowing of enough, we see that the deepest knowledge is not something we hold in our minds. It is a state of being, a clear, quiet, and fully embodied presence, from which right action, true discernment, and authentic peace naturally arise. Let's now turn our attention to a paradox: how no mind engages with planning and the future. The very territory of the anxious, thinking mind. We find our story in the meticulous world of a master shipwright in a Norwegian fjord. Eric built wooden fishing boats by hand, a craft passed down for generations. His vessels were legendary for their seaworthiness. A young engineer, Lars, interned with him, eager to apply modern design software. He was baffled by Eric's process. The old man had no detailed blueprints. He had a mental image, a few chalk marks on the lofting floor, and then he began to shape the keel. But how do you know the exact curvature of the hull? Lars asked. The displacement, the center of gravity. One mistake and the boat will be slow or unstable. Eric ran a hand along a freshly shaped oak rib. The sea will tell me, he said. I do not draw a boat for a perfect, flat sea. I shape a boat that wants to meet the sea. I think of the water it will push through. I feel the curve that wants to slip, not fight. My hands remember the lines of my father's boats, and his father's. That memory is in my fingers, not on paper. If I think too much about numbers, I become stiff. The wood knows how to be strong. The sea knows how to move. My job is to introduce them to each other in a good way. He pointed to a half-formed hull. Is it right? I will not know until it floats. But I feel it in here, he tapped his chest. A rightness. Planning is not about controlling the future. It is about listening so deeply to the nature of wood and water that the future boat already lives in the present timber. Then, I just get out of the way. For Eric, the future, a seaworthy boat, was not a distant goal to be anxiously engineered, but a potential already alive in the present materials and his embodied craft. His planning was an act of intuitive foresight, a Mushin state where he aligned his actions with the inherent intelligence of his materials and their purpose. This teaches no mind as intuitive foresight. We often plan from a place of fear, trying to control every variable to avert disaster. This is exhausting and often creates rigid plans that shatter on contact with reality. Mushin offers a different approach, a deep, trustful listening to the present moment. You understand the principles, of wood, of sea, of your project, so thoroughly that you can feel the right next step unfolding from the current conditions. Planning becomes a flexible, responsive dialogue with reality, not a rigid imposition upon it. The anxiety of controlling the future is replaced by the confidence of moving in harmony with the grain of the present. Now, let's visit a realm where the future is statistically predictable yet individually uncertain, a horse track. An old trainer, Paddy, had a gift for sensing which horse was ready. He didn't just look at times or breeding. He'd stand at the stall for long minutes, watching the animal's breath, the set of its ears, the quietness in its eye. It's not about fitness, he'd say. It's about presence. A horse that's here, in its body, not spooked by ghosts or dreaming of the feed bag. A horse whose mind is quiet and whose energy is coiled like a spring, that's a horse that can run its race, not think about it. A young data analyst working for a syndicate scoffed. He built models factoring in hundreds of variables. Yet, Paddy's quiet assessments, his feel, consistently outperformed the models on race day. Frustrated, the analyst asked, "What variable am I missing?" Paddy smiled. "You're missing the horse. Your numbers are about the horse's past. I am feeling the horse's present." A horse can have perfect numbers but be soured, distracted, its spirit elsewhere. That horse has already lost. Or a horse can have mediocre numbers but be absolutely, fiercely here. That horse can surprise everyone. The future isn't in the past data. It's in the quality of attention right now. Paddy's skill was perceiving the state of Mushin in another creature. He could see when an animal was unified, undivided by fear or anticipation. That unity was the predictor of peak performance. He wasn't predicting the future, he was recognizing the present moment condition from which a certain future naturally flows. This illustrates no mind as reading presence. We try to predict outcomes by analyzing historical patterns. But the most crucial factor is often the current state of consciousness, the alignment, focus, and quietness of the mind involved. A team, an individual, even a project has a presence. Is it scattered, forced, anxious? Or is it collected, fluid, attentive? Mushin is the ability to perceive this qualitative state in yourself and others. From that perception, you can make wiser decisions than any purely quantitative analysis allows. The future is not a separate thing. It is the next moment emerging from the quality of this one. Let's shift from prediction to a field dedicated to shaping the future, architecture, in the deserts of the UAE. A visionary architect, Layla, was designing a self-cooling building inspired by termite mounds. Her team was buried in fluid dynamic simulations, material stress tests. Layla would often stop, close her eyes, and sit perfectly still in the middle of the design hub. "What are you doing?" her lead engineer asked, irritated by the apparent inactivity during a crunch. "I'm listening to the wind," Layla said calmly. "Not the wind data. The feeling of wind. I'm trying to remember the sensation of coolness in the shadow of a canyon wall. The design isn't in the software. The software tests the design. The design comes from here." She placed a hand on her belly. "It's a felt sense of flow, of coolness rising, heat sinking. If I get that feeling clear inside, my hand knows how to sketch it. The thinking mind just messes it up by asking, will it work, too soon? First, it has to be. Then we see if it works." For her, the groundbreaking design emerged not from iterative problem solving, but from a quiet, embodied intuition, a Mushin moment where she became one with the natural principle she sought to emulate, passive cooling. The analytical phase came after, to refine and validate the insight that arose from stillness. This demonstrates no mind as generative vision. True innovation often doesn't come from linear thinking, let's improve X by 10%. It arises as a holistic vision, a gestalt, from a mind that is quiet enough to perceive new connections and patterns. The thinker's mind can only rearrange known elements. The silent, intuitive mind can perceive entirely new forms. By cultivating periods of non-thinking, receptive awareness, we create the inner space for true novelty to emerge. The future is not planned, it is envisioned from a deep, quiet place, and then engineered into reality. Now, to the most intimate future we all face, the well-being of our children. A mother, Anya, was caught in the modern parenting trap of optimal development. Her mind was a whirlwind of schedules, cognitive apps, enrichment activities, the right foods, the wrong screens. She was exhausted, and her son, Milo, was becoming anxious and resistant. Her own mother, visiting, watched the frenzy and finally said, "You are trying to build a perfect future child. But you are missing the present child. Look at him." Anya saw Milo, not as a project, but as a small boy, sitting on the floor, utterly absorbed in watching a ladybug crawl across his knee. His face was a portrait of quiet wonder. In that moment, Anya's mental projector of future milestones and fears shut off. There was just her son, a ladybug, and the afternoon light. A wave of peace washed over her. She began to practice this. When her mind raced to, "Is he getting enough X?" she would pull herself back to what was actually happening: the smell of his hair, the weight of him in her lap, the silly joke he just told. Parenting from this place of Mushin, of present moment connection rather than future-focused anxiety, became less exhausting and more joyful. Her guidance came from a place of responding to the child in front of her, not the phantom adult she was trying to manufacture. The future, she realized, would grow healthily from the quality of the present soil, not from her frantic gardening. This reveals no mind as present-centered care. Whether parenting, teaching, or leading, when our care is filtered through the mind's anxieties about future outcomes, it becomes controlling and stressful. Mushin in caregiving means bringing a clean, attentive presence to the being in front of you right now. From that presence, the right word, the necessary boundary, the nurturing silence arises naturally. You are not building a future person, you are meeting a present one, fully. That meeting is the most nourishing gift, and it plants the best seeds for any future. Finally, let's contemplate the ultimate release of the future, in the face of a terminal diagnosis. A man, Thomas, was given months to live. The initial phase was pure mental hurricane, raging against the future, bargaining, frantic bucket listing, despair. Then, a strange fatigue with the storm set in. One morning, watching a spider weave a web outside his window with infinite patience, his internal struggles simply stopped. It was like I had been trying to hold back the tide with a broom, he said later. And I just dropped the broom. The future was what it was, an end. But the present was still here. The taste of this tea. The warmth of this sweater. The sound of my wife's voice in the next room. When I stopped fighting the future, the present expanded to fill all the space there was. And it was enough. It was more than enough, it was vivid, real, and strangely peaceful. I wasn't dying in the future. I was living, very simply, in the now. His Mushin was born of absolute surrender. With no future left to manage or fear, the thinking mind lost its primary domain. What remained was unadorned presence, and in it, a profound, unshakable peace. He discovered that peace isn't dependent on a long, secure future. It is the innate quality of consciousness when it is fully inhabiting the present, unclouded by mental commentary about what comes next. This points to no mind as the eternal now. Our suffering is almost always time-based. Regret about the past, anxiety about the future. Mushin is the doorway out of time-bound thinking and into the timeless present. In deep sleep, we experience this every night: no past, no future, just being. The practice of no mind is to bring a taste of that timeless presence into waking life. When you fully inhabit this breath, this sensation, this sight, the conceptual burdens of past and future lose their grip. You touch the peace that exists prior to time. The peace of simply being alive, right now. From the shipwright's intuitive lines to the trainer's reading of presence, from the architect's silent vision to the parent's present connection, and finally to the profound peace of the eternal now, we see that engaging with the future need not be an act of anxious mental projection. It can be a graceful movement from a deeply felt present. When the mind is quiet, you don't predict the future. You align with the currents of the present in a way that naturally creates a harmonious next moment. The future stops being a threat or a prize, and becomes simply the next part of the dance you are already, peacefully, dancing. We have journeyed together through many landscapes of the mind, from the stormy seas of emotion to the quiet studios of creation, from the frantic planning of the future to the profound peace of the eternal now. We've seen no mind, Mushin. Not as a blank void, but as a state of natural, intelligent flow that emerges when the thinking mind relaxes its compulsive grip. Now, as we come to rest, let's gather these threads not into a complex theory, but into the simplicity of your own direct experience in this moment. For the ultimate teaching of no mind is not in any story, but in the silent awareness that is hearing these words. Let your attention soften, and turn gently inward. Feel the weight of your body, fully supported by the surface beneath you. There is no need to adjust or move. Simply notice the sensation of being held. The pull of gravity is not a burden here, it is an anchor, grounding you in the reality of this moment. Now, bring your awareness to your breath. Not to change it, but to witness it. Feel the cool stream of air as it enters your nostrils, the slight pause, and the warmer release as it flows out. There is no right or wrong rhythm. This breath is breathing itself, guided by an intelligence far older than thought. In this simple act of feeling the body and following the breath, you have already begun. You have stepped out of the stream of thinking and into the stream of sensation. This is the gateway. Perhaps you notice thoughts arising. Plans for tomorrow. A fragment of a memory. A faint worry. This is natural. The mind's job is to think, just as the lungs' job is to breathe. See if you can notice these thoughts not as commands, but as passing weather in the sky of your awareness. You don't need to follow them, argue with them, or push them away. Simply acknowledge, thinking, and let your attention gently return to the anchor of the breath. Each return is a moment of Mushin. A moment of being whole, here, undivided. Now, let's explore this feeling of wholeness through a final, encompassing metaphor. Imagine your mind is a snow globe that has been shaken fiercely. The snow, your thoughts, swirls in a blinding, chaotic storm. You cannot see the serene landscape inside. This is the state of a tired, busy mind. Now, imagine setting that snow globe down on a steady surface. You stop shaking it. What happens? Gradually, inevitably, the swirling snow begins to settle. Each flake drifts down. The chaotic motion slows, and then stops. The water becomes clear, still. And now, you can see the beautiful, detailed landscape that was there all along, hidden by the storm. This settling is the practice of no mind. You are not destroying the snowflakes, your thoughts. You are simply ceasing to shake the globe. You are allowing the natural settling to occur. In that settled clarity, you see your own inner landscape, not as a problem to be solved, but as a peaceful scene to be inhabited. The peace was never absent. It was just obscured by the agitation you yourself were creating. Right now, in this moment, you are allowing the snow globe to settle. With each gentle focus on the breath, with each noticing of a sensation without judgment, a flake of thought comes to rest. The water clears. The landscape of your true nature, aware, peaceful, and whole, becomes visible. This true nature has many names in different traditions: Buddha nature, presence, the ground of being, the uncarved block. But you need no name for it. You can feel it. It is the feeling of being here, prior to any story about who you are or what you need to do. It is the silent awareness behind the eyes reading these words. It is the vast sky, and your thoughts are just clouds passing through. Tonight, we have heard stories of people discovering this sky in countless ways. The glassblower feeling the heat, not thinking the curve. The firefighter sensing the dragon's intent, not calculating the model. The parent seeing the child, not the project. The diplomat holding silence so the mud of conflict could settle. The dancer disappearing so the swan could appear. Each story is a different path up the same mountain. The summit is not a special spiritual state. It is this ordinary, extraordinary moment of simply being aware. So, what is the core teaching, the single takeaway from our long journey? It is this: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. You are not the controller in the mental control tower. You are the vast, silent sky through which the controller's signals pass. When you identify as the sky, the traffic of thoughts loses its power to disturb you. You can watch it with curiosity, even compassion, but you are no longer tossed by its storms. This realization is the end of the exhausting struggle. It is not the end of thinking. Thinking remains a useful tool. It is the end of identification with thinking. It is the end of believing every urgent bulletin from the mind's newsroom. How do you live from this understanding? You don't need to move to a monastery. You begin exactly where you are, with gentle, patient remembering. Number 1, create pauses. Throughout your day, insert tiny moments of Mushin. Before answering an email, take one conscious breath. Before entering your home, feel your feet on the ground for 3 seconds. Let the snow globe settle, just for a moment. Number 2, engage the senses. When the mind spins, anchor yourself in the body. Feel the steering wheel under your hands. Really taste the next sip of water. Listen to the ambient sounds as pure sound, not as named things. This pulls you into the present, the only place where peace resides. Number 3, do one thing completely. Wash one dish with your full attention. Walk to the mailbox with your mind only on the walking. In that complete engagement, the self disappears, and you taste freedom. Number 4, when lost, return. You will forget. The mind will seize control again, spinning stories of worry, regret, or fantasy. This is not failure. The moment you notice you've been lost in thought is a moment of awakening. Gently, without self-criticism, return your attention to your breath or your senses. That noticing and returning is the entire practice. It is the muscle of no mind being strengthened. This practice does not create peace. It removes the obstacles to the peace that is already, always here. Like the sun behind the clouds, your fundamental nature is clear, peaceful, and luminous. The clouds of thought may come and go, but they cannot harm the sun. As you rest here now, let this understanding sink from your intellect into your bones. Let it be felt, not just known. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Hear the subtle sounds in the space around you. Sense the limitless space of awareness that contains all of this. There is no problem to solve in this moment. No past to regret. No future to fear. Just this, presence. In this presence, the idea of a separate, struggling self softens. You are not a noun, a thing called me. You are a verb, the act of being aware. This aware being is interconnected with all things, part of the flowing intelligence of life itself. In this, there is deep belonging and an end to loneliness. Your body, tired from the day, is welcomed by this awareness. Your mind, tired from its labors, is allowed to rest within this awareness. There is nothing more you need to do to achieve this. It is already the case. So, tonight, as you drift towards sleep, practice this simplest of arts, the art of letting go. Let go of holding your body tense. Let go of directing your breath. Let go of following your thoughts. Simply be the space for all of it. Allow sleep to come as it will, like a gentle tide rising to meet you. You don't need to swim toward it. Just float in this vast, peaceful awareness, and let the tide carry you. You are safe. You are whole. You are home. The stories have ended. The teachings have been spoken. All that remains is the silent, shared reality of rest. May you carry the essence of this quiet clarity with you, not as a concept, but as a felt sense of peace that can be returned to, in a single breath, anytime. Thank you for resting here at Monk's Temple. Good night.